Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another Godot tutorial. So this tutorial is going to be a little bit unscripted. I'm going to create a player character and I'm going to go through my own process. There are so many ways to make a player character, but I'm going to show the basics of what I do when I create a player character. So without much further ado, let's go into it. So the first thing we need to do is to get ourselves some sprites. In this case, I am using Kenny's free asset for sprites. I don't know how this is called. It's called a platformer tile map, I think, and it has a sheet of sprites with some characters in here, and I'm going to use this. So in order to use this, I will need to create a new object, a new scene, call it player. I'm in the player. I'm going to drag that image in here. We can see it created the sprite 2D. I'm going to delete the name for this and let the sprite 2D name be like this by default. I will reset its transform to 0, 0, so it's centered in here. Now we can notice that this doesn't look very pixelated, so I'm going to change that. In order to do that, I go to project settings, and I will need to go in rendering textures, and instead of texture filter linear, I'm going to go to near, and we can see in here that our image looks super pixelated right now. Of course, this depends on your game, but this, since it's a pixelated kind of pixel art style, I need to go with this one. And I need to add the animation and add the frames. So on the horizontal axis, we can see that there's 9 sprites. So for the horizontal frames, I put here 9. And on the vertical, we can see there is 3. So now we can see our character is like this. If I change the frame, we can see it's going to hop like this. Okay, so now we have the sprite. I will need to change this to be a character body in order for the player to be able to control it. So I'm going to go to change type on the player, select the character body 2D, or you can write in here search character body 2D, double click this button. And now we see that the engine is complaining that, hey, I would need to have a collision shape or a collision polygon for this thing. I'm going to use a collision shape. So add child node, collision shape. And now the collision shape is saying like, hey, I would also love to have a shape indeed. So I'm going to create a new shape. I'm going to select a circle, mostly because circles behave really nicely on platformers, on the way they interact with the sharp edges of the tile set. So being round, they can go above bumps and such. Now I go back to the player, I select the player. Usually what I do, I go here in node and groups, and I say that, hey, I am part of the player group. This can be super useful in interactions with the monsters and such. So I'm always going to add the player in its group so we can identify it in a script later. And also I will look into collision, make sure that the player is being selected, look into collision and configure the collision masks. So if I click in here and edit the layer names, I'm going to have the world on layer 1 and the player on layer 2. I'm going to add some mobs on layer 3. And I say that, hey, this player is actually part of the layer 2, not part of the layer 1, and it's interacting with layer 1 and layer 3, which are the mobs. Now the last thing that I need to do is create a script for this player. I am going to right click, attach script. It's going to prompt me to save it in the same folder, but I like to keep things tidy, so I always put them in their own folder like this. Create. This created a new player script, and we can see that Godot 4 is automatically has created some script for me. We are going to go through this a little bit. Now I go back to my level and I put my player in here and I click play, and we can see that the player has jumped out of the level, and that's because the tile set has no collision. I actually made a video about this one. I think I can put a link above. I am going to also add the link in the description as well, so make sure that you check out that video. So I'm not going to go in much detail how this is done, but I'm going to add the physics layer in the tile map. This it's the world and it's interacting with the player and the mobs as well. I'm going to fill in the solid blocks like this. And now if I play the game, we can see that the player doesn't fall anymore. I'm going to create a camera. Okay, so this camera needs to be zoomed in a bit. Oh, that's a bit too much. Like this. And I want the camera to be the child of the player, and its position to be centered around the player. Maybe the zoom is a bit too much. Like this. Now we can see that the player does jump and collide with the world. Now if I go in the player script, let's look a little bit on the code. So Godot already provided with this very simple script. We have a variable which determines the moving speed of the player and the jump velocity. It's taking the gravity acceleration from the project. So if we go to physics 2D default gravity, project settings, physics, where's physics? Physics 2D, we can see that there's this value in here. And we have a physics process. If we are not on the floor, we will need to fall. So our velocity downwards is going to be the gravity value multiplied by the time. We need to do this multiplied by time when we add some of the values. If we press the UI accept, which is the space button in here, and we are on the floor, we will jump. Then we use this function input get axis, which takes two inputs, which is the left button and the right button, and this is going to create a value from -1 to 1. If we press left, it's going to be -1. If you press right, it's going to be 1. And if we have a direction and something was returned and it's not 0, we are going to put that to the velocity on the x-axis, and we multiply it with speed. So if it's left, it's -1. And we're going leftwards. If not, we are going rightwards. And now the default script is doing something interesting where we have some kind of friction implemented where the velocity is going to get decreased towards 0. So this function move toward is very interesting, and I encourage you to look into it and how it works. Essentially what it does, it takes this value and approaches it to this value, never passing this value with this increment. If actually I make this value super small, like 10% of the original value, you can see that I have some slippage when I release the button. And if I make it even smaller, like 3%, you see that everything is super slippery now, right? So that's like an almost super easy way to make ice. I'm not going to cover more complicated stuff about how to make, oh no, I fell down, how to make the player be slippery on other tiles. I might be covering that in a later video. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you do enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye!